Okay. Okay, we're in the 11th parak, the longest parak there is, and he was discussing different midos that are very prevalent in terms of the amount of people that commit the sin, and it also is on a different wavelength in terms of our Yetzer Hara for committing these, and that's why he wants to focus on these, even though, as he said in his introduction to Nikias, really Nikias and being, I guess, as perfect and careful in every aspect of the mitzvos, he says, even though it applies to every mitzvah, he says, I'm going to highlight just a few ones that I think are the most applicable for us to highlight. So we're discussing now, he says, V'nidbar ata min harayos, shegam heim min hachamudim v'heim shniyim b'madrega el hagazal. He says, I now want to speak about forbidden relations in all that encompasses, not just the specific act of arayos, and how that is something that people covet, people desire, have a strong Yetzer Hara for that. And this is second in the level right after theft. As we said earlier, from Bava Basra on Kuf Samachem Aleph, Rubam Begazal, so many people, the majority of people commit sins in the area of Gazal, Umiutam Barayos, and a minority of people commit sins in the realm of arayos. Now, it doesn't necessarily, it means, I think like a minority are in bamish arayos, but as we'll see when it comes to the general arayos, I think unfortunately it could be more than a minority. If you have a person that wants to be entirely cleansed of this sin, they want to be perfect in this area, it says, Gam lo titzarach malacha muetas. This is not a simple task. Not something that's easy to do. If someone wants to be very careful to not wear shatnez, okay, I'm not saying it's simple. It happens to be it's still a little more complicated than we would think, but it's a much easier thing to try to not wear shatnez than to try to be perfect in the area of arayos. Because it's not just the specific act of committing arayos, like I'm saying, anything that's close to it, anything related to it. Umikra malehu, and we have a pasuk in Vayikra Yud Chavav that says, "Lo sikarvu legal zerva." Don't come close to revealing nakedness. I told you, I believe last week, that it's pointed out that this is an example where the Torah puts a fence around something else from the Torah. So even though the Torah has a prohibition that you can't sleep with someone you're not allowed to sleep with, but the Torah also says, Lo sikrivu legal zerva. Don't even come close to it. Right? I use the example of by Pesach, you can't eat chametz on Pesach, but the Torah also prohibits us to have chametz in our possession, in our house on Pesach, because we shouldn't come to accidentally eat it because we're so used to it. The Amru Zachron Levracha in Shmos Rabbah Tetzayin Beis, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem said, Al Toimar Hoil ve'asar li leishtamish be'isha. You shouldn't rationalize and say, since Hashem doesn't want me to have relations with this woman, Hareini tovsa ve'im liyavon. Let me just hold her hand, and there's nothing, no other sin involved. Hareini megapapav ve'im liyavon. Let me give her a hug. What's the big deal in giving someone an innocent hug? Oshani noshka ve'im liyavon. Let me give her a kiss. Nothing wrong with an innocent kiss, right? Unfortunately, oftentimes sometimes in our modern Orthodox circles, certainly I could speak about general high schools, unfortunately sometimes many people have this attitude. What's the big deal? Shomer Negiah, only the frummest kids are Shomer Negiah. Right? Everyone, you give a high five, you give a hug, it's not a big deal. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shem she'im nadar nazir shalolish tos yayin. Just as when it comes to a Nazir, what is a Nazir prohibited to do? Nazir is prohibited to drink wine. So the Torah though says, Asar lechal anavim lachem yiveshim mishas anavim chol yotze migefen yayin. That's not a quote from the Torah. The Torah does prohibit every component that's tied towards grapes and wine. Anything, whether it's even having a raisin, a dried out grape, that's prohibited. Af isha she'ina shalcha also ligaba kol ikar. So too, that when it comes to someone who's you're not married to, you can't touch her at all. Sometimes you can't sleep with that person. You can't touch her at all. Can't even get close to it. Anyone who does this, anyone who breaches this, causes death to come upon them. Right? Terrible thing. And the Ramchal points out now the brilliance in the fact that the Torah uses that as an example, and how we're able to extrapolate and learn out from the example of Nazir, which Hashem put that into the Torah. The fact that a Nazir can have wine, but there's so many other avenues to what Nazir is prohibited to do. Look how remarkable this is. When it comes to compare this to the prohibition of Nazir, since the actual prohibition is just drinking wine, the Torah forbade anything that has any shaychus, hard to translate shaychus, any shaychus to wine. He says this right here is Hashem signaling to the Chachamim how they should make restrictions in areas of halacha. Hashem said, look at the example of Nazir. Look what I did. Really, wine is prohibited, but look how many things I prohibited around that to protect the person from never coming close to drinking wine. So too, Chachamim, take a lesson from me. Take a lesson, Hashem says, from my Torah, and this is how you should make gezeros. That everything that you want to prohibit and put a fence around, it should be called the damela. It should be something that's similar to what I did over here. And you should know that what the Torah does over here by Nazir, the Chachamim could apply this then to all other mitzvahs that they see fit. And they should say that this right here, this is the Ratzon of Hashem. Hashem saying, this is what I, Hashem, want. Meaning, I'm signaling to the Chachamim that this is what you should do. You should model it after this. And then when something is prohibited amongst the Yisurim, so those things that are also unspecified, not just the thing that's obvious, not just don't drink wine, the things that are not necessarily specified, that also is prohibited. And it's pointed out here in the footnote that I have in my article version, that the actual I guess, ability that Hashem gave the Chachamim to make siyagim, to make these fences, is not from Nazir. It's actually from Ushmartem es Mishmarti, a totally separate pasuk. And so he discussed, the Ramchal, being in the footnote here, discussed why over here. Why does it bring up Nazir? So it says, because we were able to learn from Nazir that this is the place where Hashem showed that this is what he desires. So the source that Chachamim had the ability to make a fence around the mitzvah is over there. But this right here is the source. This is what Hashem wants. This is something desirable to Hashem. V'alzeh haderech asur be'inyan zeh shel harayos kol mashu hu mimeno shel haznus o akar ve'lav. That in keeping with this approach, the Chachamim prohibited not just the fact that you can't sleep with someone you're not allowed to sleep with, but everything that's related to it. In all different avenues, with all the senses, the prohibition of arayos comes into effect. Whether it's with action, of course, whether it's with seeing, whether it's with speaking, whether it's with hearing, or whether it's even b'machshava, just thinking about potentially committing one of the arayos. And this is so true, of course, Bizman Hazeh, where just with A, with the conversations that people have, B, with the internet and TV and technology and just all the exposure that we have, if this was written nowadays, I think that maybe the miutam biarayos would be rubam biarayos. Maybe that Gemara might be a little different. And also, certainly, I think this section would be elaborated much, much more than it is. Not that it's not elaborated upon, as we'll see tonight, but I think there'd be a lot more to discuss and a lot more even harifas, as harif as it is, would be even more harifas if it was Bizman Hazeh. The Ata, now, where am I at? Now up here. Oh, I see what happened. Where'd I go? I apologize for those listening on the audio. What happened over here? Oh, I see. Sorry, we're almost there. We're getting there. Okay, took a long time. I apologize, this is actually what we just read. And here we go. The Ata Avi, let's see where we are. He says, the Ramchal says, now, for all these senses that a person could commit within the realm of arayos, I'm going to bring proofs for you regarding each and every one of these. And he's going to go through each and every one by one. So he starts with Maisa. The Hainu, when it comes to the action, the Hainu anigia o achiba b'chayotze, comes to touching or hugging. He says, I don't have to elaborate upon Maisa. Maisa is very obvious. I spoke about it. Hugging, kissing, mamish having relations. That's what's prohibited. Continues. Bir'iyah, when it comes to seeing. So this certainly, when it comes to things Bizman Hazeh, this would be elaborated upon much more. Bir'iyah amru zechron lebracha yad liyad lo yinakei ra. Gemara Brachos on Samach Aleph Amud Aleph says, it quotes a pasuk from Mishlei, Perkei Aleph Mishlei, that hand to hand you won't be spared from evil. So what's going on? What does this mean? So it says the Gemara, Kol merata mos miyado liyada kedei listaka ba lo yinaka midina shel Gehenna. Intense stuff. If a person who works behind the counter and has to give money to a woman, if he gives it into her hand in order to see her stretch out her hand, to get a glimpse of her hand, to see her beauty, just of her hand, says that person will need some cleansing from Gehenna just for that. Because he's dafka doing it for to get pleasure, to look at her hand in that way. The Amru Od says in Shabbos Samach Daled, that the Jewish people, when it came to the story at the end of Parshat Balak, where Bilam convinced the Midyanim, the women, to seduce the Jewish people, and unfortunately there were over, I think, somewhere around 20,000, a large number of Jewish men who were killed in a plague there because they committed a riot with the women from Midian. They had them, as Rashi discusses there, they were about to sleep with them, and then they pulled out an idol, basically said, serve this idol if you want to sleep with me. And because they had such a strong desire to be with these women, they bowed down to that Avodah Zarah. And those people were killed. And the Jewish people who ended up fighting, the good Jewish people, not the ones who were killed and committed the sin, but the good ones who fought against Midian. So, of course, when you're fighting, you're going to another place and you're seeing the whole nation. So they saw some of the women from Midian, and they needed a certain kapara. They needed atonement when they came back. Not because they physically did anything wrong, Right? Unfortunately, sometimes it comes up in the news when someone's at war, or they do terrible, inhumane things to the people they're fighting against. That's not what happened here. It says just because their eyes saw the erva, the women who were dressed inappropriately, they needed a kapara for that, for just the pleasure from gazing at these women, from seeing them. So Amar of Sheshes, Sheshes says, that when it lists the possessions that they got, it lists certain exterior jewels and maybe necklaces and bracelets, but it also lists certain jewelry that is on the inside, something that covers up the makomos ha'erva. So it says, why does it list those with the other ones? That anyone who looks at the finger of a woman, brought down the Rambam for pleasure, not just that you could look at the finger of a woman if it's not for pleasure, but if you look at the finger of a woman to derive pleasure from that, it's as if you're looking at her most private area. Very intense stuff. It says in Gemara Vazara on Kaf Amud Aleph, Nishmarta mikol davara, and you should guard yourself from anything evil. Pasuk in Dvarim Kaf Gimel Yud. A person shouldn't look at a woman for beauty, even if she's a single woman. Assuming you're single also. Obviously, if you're married and she's single, that's not necessarily so good. And even if whether you're married or single, but if you look at a married woman, even if she's unattractive, totally unattractive to you, so you shouldn't do that. So very, very intense stuff. The inyan hadibur, okay, so that's enough for seeing. Like I said, nowadays there's a lot more we collaborate on. Obviously, just simply, it's a very, very difficult nisayon for every guy, almost every guy, if not literally every guy. And obviously, we have to do our best to be machazik ourselves in this area. And it's always important, just to elaborate for another second on this, it's always important to think that before a person, or when a person is tempted to sin, whatever it is, but certainly in this area, you should tell yourself you're above this. You don't want to do it, and fight the Yetzer Hara and fight it. But if, unfortunately, you end up sinning, then the trick that the Yetzer Hara does to us is it tries to get us to stay down. It tries to get us and tells us, how are you going to go to Mariv now? How are you going to go to Shachas tomorrow? You know, you just did. You think you're going to act so from? That's the Yetzer Hara speaking to us. The Yetzer Hara wants us to stay down, wants us to continue sinning, and to never recover from it. And it's important that before you sin, you should say, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to do that, and try your best to fight it. And if unfortunately you do sin, you have to try your best to just move past it. You could have some guilt about it, of course. There is concept of charata or tshuva, but you should pick yourself up and say, I'm going to start again now, starting a new streak, whatever it is. It's an important thing. Okay, continuing on in dibur, the inyan hadibur in ma'isha, the head yashninu. It's explicit in Pergavos, Parakal Mishnah Hey. Kalamar besicha ma'isha gorm ra la'atma. Pretty bad stuff. Speak a lot to women, you're going to cause evil, bad to come to you. It's brought down here, could be just, on the smallest level, like being bittul Torah, not doing things that are productive for you when you're just talking a lot with women. But of course, it could lead to actual, much more intense sins when you speak a lot to women. Also, a hard thing, is that based on your profession, based on certain things. Ubishmiya amru, when it comes to listening, so Gemara Brachos and Kaf Daled Aleph says, Kol be'isha erva, right? We have a prohibition of Kol isha. As a high school teacher, I can tell you that one of the things that my female students, almost inevitably every single year, if not multiple times every single year in each class, that they always want to discuss this, and something that frustrates women a lot. The fact that they can't sing, and it's frustrating, and I understand the frustration. But nonetheless, HaKadosh Baruch Hu forbade us Chazal forbid to listen to the voice of a woman. Different mafarshim about to what extent. Of course, a koli amalo pligi, a single individual, one person live in front of you, koli amalo pligi usher. Almost once you get past that, a lot of different opinions, different opinions regarding what is prohibited, but certainly listen to a woman's voice could cause a person to have improper thoughts and could cause a person to potentially have improper actions because of it. And when it comes to speaking it, when it comes to speaking znus, when it comes to speaking about promiscuity, licentiousness, or listening to it, the Chacham cried out and screamed out about this. It says in Vayikra Kaftal Zayin that when it says in Torah that you don't want to see in Ervas Davar, Ervas Dibur Zenivil Path. So that's a pasuk in Devarim, but the Midrash says that that's referring to, it could be alluding to also Nivil Peh. I have heard that term Nivil Peh, so like lewd speech related to these issues. The Amro Gemara in Shabbos Lam Gimel Aleph says, "Be'avo navlus pet tzars mischachos uvachure son ehem shalis al mesim." That because of this, here it uses a euphemism. It says the enemies of Israel shall be destroyed, but really when it says enemies of Israel, here euphemistically it means actually Bnei Israel. It doesn't want to say explicitly Bnei Israel be killed. The Amru Od, and says further, Kol menabel piv mamikim lo Gehenim. You're deepening your plot in Gehenim by speaking Nivul Peh. The Amru Od, Hakol Yodim Kala Lama Nechneses Al. Everyone knows that when a woman's getting married, everyone knows what happens on the wedding night, right? It's a mitzvah to be together. Allah Kol menabel piv yomra, but someone who explicitly says that, to bring that up explicitly and say it, this is probably one of the most intense lines you'll ever hear. Says the Gemara that even if a person had 70 good years, and it uses the number 70 because that's considered a full life, even if you did a full mitzvahs all your entire life, this could turn over all of those for you to turn those over all to bed. Such intense thing, right? There are certain things sometimes where a person could undo all the good that they did, right? Let's say in high school, so that sometimes you could have a kid who's an amazing student, but they do one very, very terrible thing. I'll use let's say they punch a teacher in the face, right? So they will highly likely be expelled for that. What do you mean? This was their first infraction. They were honor students, best behaved kid for 3 years of high school. All of a sudden they punch someone in the face and now they're out? Yeah, they're out because that's really bad. So over here to bring up explicitly like what a woman does on the wedding night, it's terrible. And obviously things related to this, to not speak this way. The Amr Od, and says Gemara Chagiga Hema Beis, Afilu Sicha Kalash Ben Ish the Ishto Magidim Lo Adam B'Shas Hadin. That when a person passes away, we're going to be judged for every single act, every thought, and every word that we utter. And we're even going to be judged for every word that a husband says to his wife, that a wife says to, that a wife will say to us. We're judged for everything. Regarding just listening to this. So it says, Af hashomea v'shosek, that even someone who listens and is silent. The concept over here, why I mentioned silence, is because if you're silent when something takes place, that shows that you're okay with what's going on, right? With all the, let's say, Black Lives Matter and the protests, right? So one of the worst things is a person who's just totally silent, who doesn't bring up the issue at all, right? That's how an issue continues, when nobody speaks up. Nobody tries to do something about that. So here, someone is speaking around him, znus, and nivul peh, and they're silent. So it says in Mishlei, Shneim Mar, Mishlei Kav Beis Yadalid, Ze'um Hashem Yipal Sham. Hashem is angry at this person. That we see that every single avenue when it comes to znus, when it comes to arayos, every single thing is accounted for, and it's something that, like I said, something that we all need chizuk in. Even though the Gemara says that miutam the arayos, I think for all these ancillary components of arayos, unfortunately, it's very prevalent. We need to do our best to be strong. Okay, right.